Welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something really practical, something important for so many of you, getting that real confidence and fluency when you're taking English.
Yeah, and we're diving into this using insights from materials you've shared, specifically those titled Mastering English Speaking Confidence and Fluency. And these aren't, just vague tips. They offer some pretty specific takes on the common hurdles learners hit.
Exactly. So our mission here is to really cut through these sources, pull out the most vital, actionable bits. The idea is to give you strategies you can grab onto right now, start using today.
Yeah.
Not just to improve what you say, but crucially, how confidently you say it.
It's really about making the whole process feel less intimidating, making that journey to fluency feel a lot more doable and, well, effective for you.
Okay, let's get into it then. The sources jump right into something pretty foundational, almost the bedrock, you could say. Daily, consistent practice. Why is that daily grind, putting in that work every single day, so non-negotiable according to them?
Well, it's really about building habits, isn't it? And muscle memory, too, not just understanding concepts in your head. Think about any skill, really, playing guitar, sports. Repeating it daily trains your brain and, importantly here, your mouth. Yeah, to make those English sounds and patterns feel automatic.
Oh, okay.
It shifts the language from feeling, foreign and clunky to something more natural over time.
That makes total sense. It's like knowing about fitness versus actually, showing up at the gym regularly. Consistency drives it.
Precisely. And what these sources really stress, which I think is key, is that daily doesn't have to mean hours and hours. Even short focused bursts, say 10, 15 minutes, they build that vital momentum. You really see the difference over weeks and months.
So for you listening, it's not about suddenly finding these huge empty blocks in your schedule. It's more about spotting any small window consistently. Maybe a few minutes on your commute, lunch break, before bed, whatever actually works for you.
That consistency factor is the magic ingredient, definitely what these sources are pointing to.
Okay, now let's pivot a little because the sources immediately link that habit building with, well, probably the biggest hurdle for most people, the mindset. Specifically that fear, that real fear of making mistakes. How do these experts suggest we deal with that?
Oh, this is so crucial. The message coming through loud and clear from the sources is mistakes aren't failures, they're signposts. They're just a totally unavoidable, actually necessary part of the learning process. The focus really needs to shift from chasing perfection to just making, real tangible progress.
So it's about changing how you see those slip-ups, yeah, reframing them.
Absolutely. And these sources are big advocates for finding a safe environment to practice in, especially at the start. This could be like a supportive friend, maybe a language partner you trust, or even just practicing alone. That's powerful too, because there's zero judgment.
Right. And along with that external safety net, there's the internal one, building up that positive self-talk.
Yes, definitely. Actively telling yourself things like, okay, I can do this, or every mistake is actually me learning. That genuinely builds up your resilience, your confidence from the inside. The sources also suggest celebrating small wins. Maybe you mastered a tricky new phrase or you just stuck to your daily practice. Those little victories build momentum and prove to yourself you're moving forward.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed looking at the whole mountain, isn't it? But acknowledging the little steps you've already climbed, that's really motivating. And feeling hesitant or nervous,
Yeah.
that's completely normal, right?
Totally normal. The sources are very clear about that. They acknowledge it up front. The whole point is that consistent, low-pressure practice slowly chips away at that nervousness. And just accepting that it's okay not to be perfect, that lifts a massive weight off your shoulders.
Okay, great. So let's shift from those foundational ideas, the habit, the mindset, to the actual techniques. The practical stuff the sources recommend for active speaking practice. One really simple one they push is just speaking aloud to yourself.
Yeah, it sounds almost too simple, right? But the way these experts frame it, it's incredibly effective. You can just narrate your day. Okay, now I'm making coffee, right? I'm reading this email, or talk about your plans for the weekend. Maybe read a news article or a story out loud.
And the benefits they list are actually pretty compelling. It's a safe space, no judgment. Just getting the words out builds confidence. It helps your pronunciation. And crucially, it gets your brain thinking in English, not just translating all the time.
Exactly. It might feel a bit silly for some people, at least initially, but the sources highlight it as a really powerful tool because, well, it's always available. And it takes away that anxiety of speaking to another person while still giving you valuable practice time.
Okay, building on that idea of speaking aloud, the sources also really recommend repeating and shadowing. What's the logic behind those techniques?
Well, repeating sentences or short dialogues you hear from native speakers, that's all about mimicking the sound and the structure. The sources suggest finding, short audio clips online, maybe using bits from podcasts or videos you're watching anyway.
And shadowing. That's where you listen and try to speak along at the same time, or maybe just a fraction of a second behind. That technique seems really focused on rhythm, intonation, how sounds link together.
It's like a physical workout for your mouth, basically. Helping those muscles get used to the flow, the melody, the prosody of natural English speech.
Right.
It trains you not just to say the individual words correctly, but how to connect them smoothly with the right stress patterns. That's absolutely key for sounding natural and, frankly, for being understood easily.
The sources also mention role-playing scenarios. Practicing interactions you might actually encounter, like checking into a hotel or asking for help in a shop.
Yeah, this is fantastic prep work. By rehearsing those common situations beforehand, you automatically reduce the nervousness you'd feel in the real moment. Why? Because you've already practiced the useful vocabulary, the polite phrases you'll need.
Like knowing how to say, "Could you please?" Or remembering, "Thank you very much," smoothly.
Exactly. The sources even provide a sample scenario, a customer asking for a gift idea, just to show how you can practice those typical back and forth exchanges. Practicing that interaction definitely makes a difference when it happens for real.
It moves it from being this huge mental effort to something more automatic.
Pretty much, yeah. Semi-automatic response.
Now, here's something the sources describe as a real game changer for fluency: thinking in English. Why is that such a powerful shift?
Because it tackles that really common bottleneck many learners face, the constant translation lag. Thinking in your native language, translating it into English, then speaking. When you start actually thinking directly in English, you just bypass that whole translation step.
Which means you can respond much faster, right? Conversations just flow better. So how do the sources suggest you actually start doing this? It sounds quite hard.
They say start incredibly small, like really small, just naming objects around you in English but in your head, or describing simple actions as you do them. The chair is brown. I'm closing the laptop. It feels maybe a bit strange at first, sure, but the sources promise that with consistent practice, it gradually becomes more natural, more of a default way of thinking.
That gradual approach makes it feel less daunting, definitely. Okay, let's shift gears slightly, but it's all connected. The sources argue strongly that listening is like half the conversation.
Yeah.
Why is active listening so vital for improving your speaking?
Well, you can only really produce language effectively if you're getting good input, right? Listening exposes you to how English actually sounds, the real pronunciation, the rhythm, how words are naturally strung together in sentences. Plus, it helps you tune your ear to different speeds, different accents. It basically provides the raw material that fuels all those speaking techniques we were just talking about.
So it's not just letting sound wash over you, it's really paying attention. What specific listening techniques do the sources recommend?
They suggest starting with short, clear audio, maybe simple conversations or stories, and then the active part is trying to repeat what you heard or summarize it, even just in your head. That confirms you actually understood it and practices recalling the language.
They even give that very simple dialogue example. A, what time is the meeting? B, it's at 3 p.m. in the conference room. And the exercise is just to really hear it, then repeat it, practicing that basic question-answer rhythm.
Yes, exactly. Engaging with those foundational exchanges is surprisingly effective. Watching movies or TV shows is also high on their list, naturally.
Yeah, the fun stuff. That connects the spoken word with visuals and often with written text, too, if you use subtitles. The sources suggest a kind of progression there.
Start with subtitles in your own language if you need to, then switch to English subtitles that links the sound to the spelling, and eventually try turning them off completely to really push your listening skills.
Plus, it's great for picking up everyday phrases, maybe some slang, and just getting comfortable with different accents in a more relaxed way.
Definitely. And they also mention music.
Right, singing along. Especially maybe slower songs to begin with.
Yeah, the rhythm and melody act like little memory hooks for vocabulary and phrases. And singing naturally makes you try to mimic the pronunciation. They suggest using online lyrics to follow along and catch any words you don't know.
And podcasts, of course. Great for hearing natural conversations on tons of different topics. Pausing to look things up if you get lost, that's encouraged.
Absolutely. What these sources really highlight is that it's a cycle. The better you listen, the better your input. And that directly feeds back into improving your speaking output.
Okay, let's move on to the actual tools we use to express ourselves. Vocabulary and grammar. For building vocabulary, the sources advise focusing first on those common, high-frequency words you use in daily life. Makes sense.
Yes, and they strongly, really strongly emphasize learning phrases or chunks, not just single isolated words. So instead of memorizing hello, then how, then are, then you, just learn how are you as one useful unit.
Right, it gives you ready-made blocks to build conversations with, which must boost confidence.
Exactly. And learning words in context, seeing them used in a sentence or a little story rather than just from a list.
Why is that better?
Well, the source materials explain that helps you understand how to actually use the word correctly. Learning the word run is okay, but learning I run every morning or she runs fast, that teaches you the usage, the common patterns, right alongside the word itself.
Got it. They also suggest learning synonyms to make your speech more interesting.
Yeah, adding variety. So instead of always saying happy, maybe sometimes use joyful or pleased or content. It just makes your English sound richer. And they mention practical tools too, like using flashcards or vocabulary apps.
Okay, how do the sources approach grammar? That's often a big point of anxiety for learners.
They definitely acknowledge that basic grammar rules are necessary, for clear communication. But interestingly, these particular sources seem to lean towards prioritizing fluency first. Getting comfortable just speaking, getting your ideas out there. They suggest that grammatical accuracy often improves more naturally after you've built a solid foundation of actually using the language.
So the message is kind of, don't let the fear of grammar mistakes paralyze you. Don't let it stop you from speaking.
That seems to be the core idea. Get the words flowing, and then you can refine the grammar as you go. And writing, they mention, can actually help with this too.
How so?
Well, writing gives you time to think, to structure your thoughts. Practice forming grammatically correct sentences without the pressure of a real-time conversation. Then you can take what you've written and practice saying it aloud.
Ah, I see. So it connects different practice modes again. Now, the sources also mention those trickier bits, idioms and phrasal verbs.
Right, idioms like, it's raining cats and dogs, where the meaning isn't literal at all. The sources note they make your speech sound much more natural, more native-like, but yeah, they require some specific effort to learn.
So what's the advice?
Basically, learn a few common ones each week. The sources give examples like break the ice, starting a conversation, or break a leg for wishing someone good luck. Using them correctly really adds flavor.
And phrasal verbs. They're notorious, aren't they? Things like look up, get along, run out of.
They're super common, but definitely tricky because that little preposition completely changes the meaning. The sources suggest practicing them regularly, using them in sentences, maybe trying to group them by theme, like all the phrasal verbs related to travel or work. That might make them easier to remember and use.
Okay, shifting focus a bit to external support. How can we leverage resources and interactions, according to these materials?
Technology is a big one. The sources point to things like language exchange apps, flashcard apps, obviously, even just the voice recorder on your phone to listen back to yourself. And of course, the huge amount of content, online podcasts, YouTube channels tailored to learners. The main idea is using tech for constant exposure and easy practice opportunities.
And if it's possible, actually speaking with native speakers is framed as like one of the absolute fastest ways to level up.
Oh, definitely. It gives you that authentic interaction, exposure to natural speech rhythms, common idioms and slang, and it really builds your confidence for real-world situations. Nothing quite like it.
But what if you don't live somewhere with many native speakers around?
That's where tech really shines, bridging that gap. The sources highlight online language exchange websites, apps that specifically connect you with native speakers for practice, or joining online English-speaking groups or clubs, maybe ones focused on shared interests.
Ah, joining groups based on your actual hobbies. That's a clever angle.
Yeah, it makes practicing feel less like a chore and more like fun, right? Because you're actually talking about things you care about anyway. Plus, you naturally learn vocabulary related to your interests, and it helps with writing and reading skills too, all in a context you enjoy.
And they even suggest using humor, like jokes or funny stories.
Yeah, it seems it helps keep practice light, makes potentially tricky phrases or idioms stick better when learned in a fun mood. Laughter's a good memory aid. And they also mention keeping up with daily news in English.
For more formal language, maybe.
Exactly. Good for more formal vocabulary, staying informed on different topics, and general listening comprehension too.
Okay, let's circle back to those common challenges we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
Hesitation and pronunciation. Do the sources offer practical tips for actually overcoming those?
They do. For hesitation and nervousness, they really just reinforce those core ideas. Consistent practice, finding that safe space, and keeping that positive mindset. Tactical things include maybe starting with lower stakes chats, like with understanding friends, or consciously deciding to speak a bit more slowly when you feel nervous. Simple relaxation techniques, like taking a deep breath before you speak, are also recommended.
And just reminding yourself constantly, it's okay, everyone learning makes mistakes. That's like a key mental tool.
It really is. Now, for pronunciation, the sources get a bit more specific. They suggest first identifying English sounds that don't exist in your native language.
Like the sound, maybe. That's a common one.
Exactly that kind of thing. Practice the specific sounds by themselves first, really slowly, then try them in words, then build up to using them in full sentences. Listening carefully to native speakers and actively trying to copy them, that's where that shadowing technique we talked about really comes in handy again.
They also mentioned tongue twisters as a fun way to practice.
Yeah. She sells seashells by the seashore, that kind of thing. They might feel silly, but they genuinely help improve your articulation, get your mouth muscles working correctly, build clarity. And the sources strongly advise recording yourself speaking.
That can be tough, listening back to yourself, but I guess it's effective.
It's maybe the most objective way to hear your own pronunciation and track your fluency progress over time. You can just use a voice memo app on your phone or computer. And again, the sources stress: don't aim for perfection right away. Improvement is gradual.
What about dealing with all the different English accents? American, British, Australian, and so on.
The sources acknowledge that diversity. The general advice seems to be, maybe focus on understanding one main accent reasonably well first, just to build a solid listening base. Once you're comfortable with one, it usually becomes easier to adapt and understand others over time.
And finally, something that maybe gets overlooked sometimes, body language. The sources actually say it's quite important for speaking confidence and fluency. How so?
Well, it's all that nonverbal communication that supports what you're saying, right? Using natural gestures, facial expressions, nodding, it makes your message clearer, especially maybe when you're momentarily stuck for a word. It also makes you seem more engaged, more lively, and ultimately more confident.
So don't be afraid to use your hands or show some expression on your face.
Absolutely not. It's a natural part of how we communicate, and it can really help bridge gaps.
Wow, okay. We have covered a lot of ground, pulling all that from these sources. It really feels like the main theme isn't about finding one magic bullet, is it? It's much more about consistent, deliberate effort across lots of different areas.
Exactly that. It's presented as more of a marathon, definitely not a sprint. It requires patience and actually finding ways to enjoy the learning process itself.
So the core strategies we've distilled from these materials really boil down to making practice a daily thing, getting your mindset right about mistakes, actively using techniques like talking to yourself, shadowing, trying to think in English.
And prioritizing listening to get good input, focusing vocabulary on context and useful phrases, using technology and finding people to talk to, tackling hesitation and pronunciation systematically.
And remembering that things like body language play a part too.
It's that consistent mix of different methods that's what the sources seem to point to as the most effective path forward.
And that really brings us towards the end of this deep dive into mastering English-speaking confidence and fluency. Based on the materials provided, we've tried to pull out the most practical, actionable insights.
Yeah, and the key takeaway I think that these experts keep emphasizing is that fluency isn't really about achieving perfection. It's about making steady progress and learning to communicate your ideas effectively, even with imperfections.
So thinking about all these different approaches we've discussed, from, talking to yourself in the mirror to singing along with songs to finding online partners, what's one small, consistent step that you, listening right now, could take starting today? Something that might have the biggest, most noticeable impact on your speaking confidence just this week.
Just pick one thing that resonated and give it a try. Commit to it for the week.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope these insights drawn from the sources give you some valuable tools and maybe some fresh motivation for your English learning journey.